Judging from the success of the first F.E.A.R game, you'd expect there to be some sort of sequel, and there was. F.E.A.R 2 was released in 2009 for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360. Once again developed by Monolith Productions, running on a yet again updated Lithtech engine. F.E.A.R 2 takes place around the time in the first game's storyline where things were ending. You play as a soldier named Beckett, sent into the city with a special forces team to extract and protect Genevieve Aristide, a character referred to frequently in the first game. Right about this time is when the Point Man destroys the armor camp facility, releasing Alma and setting off a chain reaction that decimates the nearby city. Shortly after this, Genevieve ends up giving Beckett the same powers as the Point Man in a scene that can only be described as some pretty blatant retconning.
It could be in V-Fit. Charge to 200. No, make that 300.
From there, things get a little bit muddled and you're just kind of on the move to do something. It's never really too clear. What is known is that Alma has an interest in Beckett from the outset, and she wants to do much more than just holding hands, if you catch my drift. I mean, there's nothing hotter than a psychopathic naked chick trying to jump your bones, right? Anyone who's played the first game should feel right at home here, and it's not long before things are in full motion, with Beckett busting out of a hospital and killing platoons of armor camp soldiers in the process. One of the first things you'll probably notice is that they've implemented proper iron sights, enemies are highlighted during reflex time, and you're now able to cook grenades. Combat is still highly enjoyable, and environments can be torn apart in gunfights just as before. On top of that, they've also packed a lot more detail into the engine, and things look a lot better overall, as well as having a much greater variety of locations for each mission. There's a couple of sections where you get to jump in a large mech suit and cut your way through legions of soldiers with miniguns and rocket launchers. These might seem a bit out of place at first, but then again remember, these are the guys who made Shogo. Most of the weapons are recycled from the first game, though they have been entirely reskinned. I am a little bit annoyed that they've practically ruined the shotgun, making it much less effective, but that I can live with. What I can't deal with is the fact that the game just feels like it's on autopilot. It borrows heavily from a lot of other games and doesn't really feel that original anymore. It's got lots of those fast melee type enemies, you know, the cliched emaciated freaks that move super fast and latch onto you? The type that's disturbing the first time you encounter them, but then become extremely annoying. And these are an enemy type that just seem to be packed into every single shooting game that was made at the time. Enemies also seem to come in waves now, as opposed to taking on squads at a time, a concept which played a large part in why the first game was so enjoyable. Something that made F.E.A.R 1 so memorable, and really helped the gunfights, was the fact that you were always in medium to close range with your enemies. But in F.E.A.R 2, you're often in much larger, expansive areas where you just have to take a more traditional approach to shooting. I guess it's good in the sense that it's more diverse than the first game, but it just makes it feel so much more derivative. I'm also a little bit miffed that melee attacks still have a tendency to miss enemies entirely. It can really ruin your buzz when you take out a bunch of guys like a badass, and then go in for a jumping karate kick to finish off the last enemy, only to miss him entirely. But aside from that, it really is just as good a game as F.E.A.R 1 for the most part, and I have to say, I've never quite understood why this game gets such a bad rap from the fans. It is a very mature, dark storyline that is handled a lot better, and it's got some downright spooky, scripted sequences and jump scares that will really catch first-time players. What does suck, however, is F.E.A.R 3. Released in 2010, F.E.A.R 3 is fairly similar to F.E.A.R 2, though it is not developed by Monolith Productions. Instead, it's a team called Day One Studios, who did a really good job of messing almost everything up. The Point Man and Paxton Felder return once again a few months after the events of the second game, as they begin a search for Alma throughout the ruined environments of a fictional city called Fairport, running into a few familiar faces along the way. The idea is that the Point Man and Paxton Felder are kind of working together for the moment to deal with the greater threat, and it is actually a pretty cool concept. You get a lot more information on their backstory as well. In a cool twist, you can also play through the single-player campaign as Fettel himself, or in a co-op mode with another player online, though I've yet to find an active game going.
Delta 3-2.
Much like F.E.A.R 2, the whole concept of taking on squads of enemies has also been thrown out the fucking window, and you just take on waves and waves of bad guys in different areas. You know, like every single other shooting game made in recent years. Quite often too, just a stupid amount of enemies at once, because apparently that's the only way to make a game difficult these days. Most of the weapons from the previous games return, along with a few new additions, including an overpowered riot shield, which is good fun but breaks the game whenever you use it.
We lost the base, Commander!
F.E.A.R 3 has a lot more of a tactical approach to the shooting, Whenever you're near a crate or a wall, you can attach yourself to it and pop out to take shots at enemies. Now, I'd be fine with this were it not for the fact that enemies are still able to shoot you even when you're in cover. This makes this feature near useless and also makes some of the later levels extremely tough. It also completely changes the feel of the gameplay, making things a lot slower. Gone are the days of running into rooms and gunning down enemies at close range with the shotgun. You try that here and you'll be rewarded with a very quick death. And then there's the visuals. Hazy, blurry lines and lots of smoke and other obstructing visual effects. It really looks like arse, which is a shame because there is an incredible amount of detail in the environments, with great textures and intricately modeled props. But you probably won't see half of it because it looks like the game's been rendered through the bottom of a Coke bottle. Something that does sharpen the visuals somewhat is running the game in Directx 9, which gets rid of a lot of the so-called atmospheric effects. And if you are going to play this game, I would suggest that as something to consider. A new addition to the series is a leveling system of sorts where you earn points for doing certain actions, like killing a bunch of people with a certain gun or spending a certain amount of time in slow motion. But what could have been a really neat idea is ruined because they don't give you any control over what the points go into. But the game's biggest problem is that it just doesn't feel like a F.E.A.R game, and it's so far removed from F.E.A.R 1 that it's almost painful. I just think the people who made this game just didn't understand what Monolith were originally going for, and giving the Point Man a face and a personality, if you can call it that, is a testament to this. I look at it this way. The reason the Point Man didn't talk or show his face in F.E.A.R 1 was because it's implied that you are the Point Man. He's not a character, he's the player's embodiment into the game. That's why when you look down at the ground you see your own feet to help make you feel like the protagonist and get you immersed. But in F.E.A.R 3, when they just turn him into a generic moody guy without any sense of charisma or character traits, it just makes him boring. There's no reason to give a shit about him whatsoever. And also reflex time, something the series is most well known for, is almost useless now, as slow motion is now much less effective at avoiding enemy fire and rushing their positions, due to some really cheaply coded enemies that are going to force you to spend most of your time in cover. Judging off what I've said, you might think that F.E.A.R 3 is a waste of time, but it's saved single-handedly by the fact that you're also able to play through the campaign as Paxton Fettel, and playing as Fettel is awesome as hell. You can possess enemies and fire on their own teammates, cause their bodies to explode in a shower of blood and guts, or just fire psychic blasts from your hands, knocking opponents over. This is by far the highlight of the entire game, and I almost wish they had have just done away with the Point Man entirely and focused on Fettel as a main character. It's just so much fun, and you have this real sense of power and control, which the Point Man's campaign can't even begin to compete with. I can't comment on the co-op mode because, like I said, I've never been able to get a match going, but with or without a friend, you're still going to run into issues throughout the 5 or 6 hour single player mode. F.E.A.R 3 on the whole isn't the type of game for everyone. Really, the only reason to play it is if you've played the first 2 games and want to see how the story all gets resolved. But even then, it doesn't really deliver where it needs to, and the fact that it all looks like a muddy toilet bowl makes it really hard to enjoy. I'd still probably recommend both of these games, but just keep in mind, like most trilogies, their quality dwindles with each installment. Both games are available on Steam for dirt cheap, and you shouldn't have any issues getting them running on modern operating systems.
I never doubted you for a second.